Hello, my name is Rhianna. Welcome to this video. You find me on a Wednesday morning at just gone 8 AM, just about to start working. I have a lovely, massive cup of tea and I feel like reading today. I want to read some books. So I'm going to work this morning, and then as I have a spontaneous afternoon off, I am going to spend that time doing something I love, which is reading. Then I have a very important question. What should I read? The never-ending question in the life of a reader. And recently I bought 3 of Penguin's Little Black Classic books, and the Penguin Little Black Classic collection was created to celebrate Penguin's 80th birthday, I believe, and what connects them all is that they're all quite short stories. And so I thought I could spend this afternoon reading the three Penguin Little Black Classics I have and see what I think of them. Now, I will note that I do have these classics on Kindle because there were like 49p on Kindle, and I love a good bargain. So the classics I have are White Nights by Dostoevsky, Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde, and The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Tolstoy. And yeah, I'll also take you along with me during the day. I mainly just need to work this morning and read this afternoon, but I also need to go to Specsavers. Hello, so it's nearly lunchtime and I've managed to read through Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast by Oscar Wilde. And initially I thought this was a non-fiction essay that Oscar Wilde wrote, but it's actually a compilation of his best quotes. And that was a little bit disappointing initially because I thought I was going to read a story, and I don't think a compilation of quotes is really a story. But Oscar Wilde, I think, is perhaps the most quotable writer to ever have lived, or definitely up there, because he has a lot of witty lines. I mean, The Picture of Dorian Gray, like the whole novel, every sentence can be quoted, really. And so I did have a good time reading through some of these sentences. But I think quotes on their own don't tend to do a lot for me. I read them and I'm like, oh, that's a nice sentiment, but it doesn't really affect me much more than that, because usually quotes are made much more impactful due to the stories that surround them. But I'll share with you a few of my favourite quotes. Prayer must never be answered. If it is, it ceases to be prayer and becomes correspondence. Most people are other people. Their thoughts are someone else's opinions, their lives are mimicry, their passions a quotation. And then the whole collection finishes with Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast. I think on the surface this is quite a just quirky, fun line, but I also think you could probably look at it in a more deeper sense. I suppose it is implying that people who get up early are maybe not the most exciting of individuals. And I am very much a morning person compared to an evening person. Like if I'm not asleep by 10 AM, if I'm not asleep by 10 PM, the next day is written off. And I probably am also quite dull. Like I do love being inside. So I think Oscar Wilde had a point. Also, I make some great porridge. And I also have porridge like every day.
Yeah, we're in a better place. That was it.
You know, when I first saw this on my Kindle, I thought I'd accidentally bought like a different White Nights, because doesn't this look like some kind of romantasy? I mean, I suppose the book is a romance, but this cover just looks very modern, I guess. Hello, so I'm now back and I have managed to complete my errands. I had a couple of hours of uninterrupted reading time, which was lovely. And I have completed White Nights by Dostoevsky. And before I give my opinion, I'll tell you a little bit about what this story is about. This story is a literary fiction story, but it's also a romance. It's about a man who wanders the streets of St. Petersburg hoping to find romance. A quote is, "I often wander like a shadow, without need and without purpose, dejectedly and sadly through the back alleys and streets of St. Petersburg." You really feel the man's loneliness, how he feels like he's not really part of the world, and how he struggles to connect with people. And then, of course, the inciting incident of the story is he meets a woman who he does feel connected to. And what I liked about this story, I did like the themes it was exploring. I do think that sometimes it can feel like even though you're surrounded by people, you can't really connect with them, because it's kind of unusual to go up to a stranger and just start making a conversation. I feel like it should be more commonplace to do that, because I think it would help everyone feel less alone and more involved in the world. And I do really love the movie Before Sunrise, where two people meet on a train and they decide to go off in Vienna and just spend the evening and the night together, and they kind of fall in love, but then they go their separate ways at the end of it. And this novel has similar sentiments as that film, but there is a but coming. And the but is that I just found the dialogue quite unrealistic. Now we have to take into account that this story was written in the 1800s, and so the way that people spoke in Russia in the 1800s is quite different to how we speak in modern day in the 21st century. But that being said, I have read a lot of classic stories that are set in the past, and I haven't found it so difficult to connect with the dialogue because it still felt like real people talking. But in this short story, it just felt like it didn't feel like real people talking. It felt very over dramatized, and it felt like a stage play. I very much felt like I was reading a story and I wasn't able to fully immerse myself into the lives of these two people. At one point, the main character is describing dreamers, which he thinks of himself as, and he says, "A dreamer settles for the most part somewhere in an inaccessible corner, as if hiding in it even from daylight, and if he climbs into his place, he grows to his corner like a snail, or at least he is very similar in this respect to that interesting animal, which is both an animal and a house, which is called a tortoise." Now, all of this writing is beautiful, wonderfully executed. I mean, Dostoevsky is a very famous writer for a reason, but this doesn't feel like dialogue. This feels very much like an internal monologue. When we are speaking, how would you ever speak so eloquently? And I suppose you have to suspend your disbelief to some extent and believe that, okay, in this world that Dostoevsky is putting these characters, maybe they can speak as eloquently as they do. But yeah, I think probably when I'm reading a romance, I just want it to be as realistic as possible. So I think White Nights is a beautiful story. I can definitely see why it's very beloved. And I mean, it's Dostoevsky, but I think maybe it's a taste thing. I just didn't find it so realistic, so I couldn't quite connect to it in the way that I would have liked. But I did enjoy reading it on the train, having a little wander around London. Hello, it's now a few days later and I finished The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. And since Wednesday, the UK decided to get boiling. Anyway, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, I really enjoyed this one. This was probably my favourite out of the 3 books that I've read in this video. So this book is all about death, and I do really enjoy books that tackle this subject because I do have quite a large fear of death, really. I don't want to die. Would really like to hang around. I just like living. So any book that tackles death and where has the possibility of helping me with this fear that I have, but I don't think that's really the goal of this book. The goal of this book is more about making the reader maybe value their life more, appreciate their life more, be aware of life's temporary nature a bit more, which is something that I don't really need help in coming to the conclusion of, because it's something that I'm very much aware of a lot. And I find that a lot of books that centre around death take the approach of teaching the reader that life is not permanent, rather than taking the approach of here's how to deal better with death. So what I really liked about this book is the structure. So in the first chapter, we're introduced to this man who works as a lawyer, and one of his colleagues has died. And I liked the quote at this beginning part of the story that says, the very fact of the death of someone close to them aroused in all who heard about it, as always, a feeling of delight that he had died and they hadn't. So we're seeing the death of Ivan Ilyich from an outside perspective. So we can empathise, but we can't properly envision what Ivan Ilyich went through. Then we switch perspective and the rest of the story is told from the perspective of Ivan Ilyich. So you get a much more clear perspective of how his death came about. And I really like that because so often we hear about death but are unable to fully empathise with what the person who died went through, because you can have the best imagination in the world and you can never fully understand what it will be to die. And so I like this book's attempt to really put you in the mind of someone who is dying. And yeah, Ivan Ilyich is dying from an illness. They can't really discern what the problem is, and so he's just like slowly dying in pain. They give him some drugs to help, but really he's in a lot of pain and he starts to feel very detached from his family. He doesn't really like his wife, to be honest, and his children doesn't really feel like connected to. He starts to very much withdraw. And you might be thinking, this story sounds depressing. And you would be right. Near the end, there is the quote, "And he stopped crying, turned to face the wall and let his mind dwell on one single question. Why all this horror? What's the reason for it?" And another one, "He burst into tears like a child. He was weeping because of his own helpless state and his loneliness and other people's cruelty and God's non-existence." So as you can see from those quotes and my describing of this book, not a particularly cheerful one, but it was written well and I think does give you the feeling of wanting to just enjoy yourself with your life, because you never know when it's going to end and what's going to happen. And that's a good message. So that's how I'll end this video. Just try to have fun. Try not to be stressed. There you go. So are the Penguin Little Dark Classics worth it? I would say yes. I found myself thinking about a lot of things while reading these books, and it's always nice for a book to make you think. Only Dull People Are Brilliant at Breakfast was probably my least favourite, just because it was a compilation of quotes. Then I would probably put White Nights by Dostoevsky, and then I would put The Death of Ivan Ilyich. And yeah, please let me know if you've read these books. Let me know if you've read any other Penguin Little Black Classics and whether you would recommend. And I'll see you in another video soon. Bye bye.